Should be coming up any minute now. Let's see. Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry I'm a couple of minutes late. I had a few technical issues here. This is Diane Dean and I'm going to be demonstrating paint pouring today. I'm using acrylics. First I'm going to talk about some of the tools that I use in the process, and I've got them setting out here on my table. One of the first things that I do is when I'm working with my canvases or even my wood, I put screws in the corner. Some of the demonstrations that you'll see will show you placing your canvases on cups, and I find that first of all the cups get all messy, they fall over, and it's kind of wasted. So I screw the screws in. Be careful not to screw them in too far, and that way you can set them down, you can easily get your hand under and pick them up. So I start with getting my my canvases ready, and then the materials that you'll be using to mix your paints. There are different formulas that are available. I like to use the 2 parts with a flow enhancer. I use the Flood Flow-Trol. There also are some products. There's a Liquitex pouring medium. I like the Flood, and it's much cheaper. This is, I think, $19 in Home Depot. So I use 2 parts of the Flood Flow-Trol, and then I use not totally 1 part, but I use distilled water. Distilled water has all of the minerals taken out of it. The minerals tend to disrupt the acrylic some. So the recipes, a lot of the recipes call for 1 whole part water, but depending on the consistency of the paint that I'm using, I sometimes use a wee bit less than. Okay, I have a director here and I've got to move my camera just a wee bit, but sometimes I use a little less than the, let's go this way, the camera is dipping down. There, we got my work surface showing up now. Okay. You'll go ahead and mix your paints together, the 2 parts flow medium, 1 part paint, and 1 part or less water. I use little miniature cups like these to measure the materials, or you can use a scale, and in fact I'm just about to pick one up. I had one that is broken, but you can, for small canvases, you can even weigh out 1 ounce of your paint, 2 ounces of your medium, and so on. So those are the materials you'll need. You'll need some cups to mix your paint in, and I use these craft stirring sticks to mix the paints. I mix the paints in a cup. Some people actually mix a lot of paints if they're going to use the same colors, and they will store them in squeezy bottles so that you can just store them. The other thing that I do add to my paints most of the time is silicone. And silicone is what will give you all those fabulous little cells. You just add a few drops in. So in front of me, I'll just show you one of these cups of paint that I've mixed, because it takes a while to stir them up and that's not terribly exciting to watch in a demo. But I've mixed this paint and you can see the consistency. It's kind of like a very thick soup. And as you work with these materials, you'll learn what works for you. If they're too thin, of course, they spread out and they mix too much, and if they're too thick, they won't spread enough. So some of the paints, even in the same brand, will be denser than others. The paints that I'm using today, I'm actually just going to use 3 colors because I think it'll show up well. And I'm going to use the Flow Acrylics from Michaels. These are very inexpensive. They're not fluid and they're not designed to be sprayed. They're just a thinner form of acrylic paint, and yet the color is pretty good. So I've got white and I've got black in the Flow Acrylic. I wanted to try a new product that's been available from Michaels for a while, and these are ready mixed Flow Acrylics. And I've used them 3 times now, and they seem to work fairly well. I add the silicone to them at the end. So I've got my paints here. Let me get my camera back a little bit. So I've got my white, my yellow, and my purple. So what I'm going to be doing next, I did this piece a little earlier, and actually I wanted to show you a couple of pieces that have some interesting cells. So let me grab a piece to have for you to have a look at. This is a piece that I did on wood, and I really do like the wood surfaces. I'm going to hold it up real close, and you can kind of get a look at where those cells are. Those cells happen because the oil or the silicone binds to the paints and causes them to separate that way. So this piece has a very organic, almost looks like a space scene. This one had a very dark background. I do apply some paint on the canvases before I start. What I'm working on today, I'm going to show you two different styles. There's lots of different ways to get the paint on your surface. I'm using some little canvas gallery wrap canvases. These are 5 inches by 5 inches, and this is a little abstract landscape that I'm doing. So I've done one, and the technique that I'm using to do this is called a swipe technique. I'm going to put my gloves on, and I'll show you how this works, and then I'm going to do a larger canvas and show you a flip technique. So there's quite a few different ways, and I know there's lots of demos out on YouTube that you can watch that show dipping strings and putting your canvas on a Lazy Susan and spinning it. There's lots of different ways. It's just a really fun medium to play with, and when I do my workshops, I bring all of the paints and the materials, and then we all just go to work and see what happens. So it's a lot of fun to do, and it's a lot of fun to watch how different the same process will work for each person. So I'm going to go ahead and start this swipe process. So for the swipe, what you need, and I've got some laminated plastic sheets here, you're going to be dragging these through the paint after you pour the paint on the canvas. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to pour a little bit of yellow. I want to have yellow on both ends. Oops, first I have to go ahead, I'm going to just do a light glaze of paint on my background, just because this will make the canvas a little slipperier. So you don't want to just pour it straight on a canvas. And even on the wood, I apply a little bit of paint just because, again, it'll just make the surface a little slipperier. So I've just put some of my white paint on there, and that looks good to go. So now I'm going to pour a few lines. I'm going to start with my yellow, and I don't want to do quite that much. These are very tiny canvases. It's easier for me to work big, but it's harder to demo. All right, we're going to put some purple. The silicone, of course, is already in here. Come on, purple, over the edge of the glass. There we go. Okay, well, I was missing the canvas totally. Okay, so here we go. We've got a little bit of purple. There we go. And then we're going to go with some white. And I'm making a pretty good mess there. Okay. And when you miss the canvas, you can still get it on there. Okay. I'm going to go with a little bit of white. So I'm just really pouring across the area, and I may probably go back in and add a little more white. So now the swipe starts. So I could pick these up and let it flow around, but I really want to have it a little more controlled. So I'm going to give myself some room here and make sure I don't bump into my paints. And I'm going to start with pulling a little bit of this purple into the yellow. And as soon as you start doing this, you're going to begin to see some cells open up for you. Come on, get on down there. Okay, I think I'm a little light on my paint, so I can go ahead and add some more. But let's let that do its thing. You can already see there's a few little cells that are opening up there. Since I've got this side dirty with the yellow and the purple, I'm going to go ahead and do this one, and then I'll wipe it off. So there's a bit of a technique to using the plastic. You sort of start with the edge, but then you kind of flatten it out and push the paint along. Come on. You want to make sure the whole thing gets covered. I'll get this one going again. I'm going to have to put a little more yellow on there. Come on, follow me along. There we go. Getting there. A little bit of purple working with it. Okay, so that's a start. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to the bottom before I start swiping going the other direction. Come on. There we go. Come on. All right, that should be plenty of paint. Okay, looking good. Looking good. All right, now some cells are going to start to form. Now we've got a lot of white paint on the top. I'm going to clean this off on my paper towel, and now I'm going to pull going the other way. There we go. I want to make sure I've got primarily white. Okay. There we go, getting some interesting cells there. Okay. And then you'll notice there's a few ridges in that one over there. I wanted to go back in and just give it a wee bit more texture by just giving it a little touch here and there. I just think that makes them kind of interesting. And I think I'll do another little drag down here and see if we can't get some more cell action going here. Got some really cool cells in the upper part of this one. There we go. Let's flatten it out. Okay. Let me pick this one up and let you have a look. This is really starting to look interesting. Can you see that cell action that's happening at the top? I can't tilt it sideways because I can tilt it a wee bit. But I don't want to tilt it too much because I want it all to just sort of sit there kind of undisturbed. I might have to go back and pour. Normally I would do, if I'm doing a three-piece, I'd do them all at once to be sure everything is working the same way. Also, as they dry, you can probably tell, but this one is starting to look a little flatter. It will really dry out to where it looks, it's just the acrylic on the surface. I typically do a resin pour over my pieces when they're finished, and I do that after I've wiped off the remainder of the silicone. And that's important because that silicone will cause the resin to kind of separate. So that's a quick little swipe. That one I'll do again. The next thing I'm going to show is actually a flip pour. And I think this was probably the first process that was used. This guy needs another little scrape here. But the flipping process was probably the first process used when people started experimenting pouring acrylics. It can be a little tricky. Just touch that guy. It can be a little tricky. It can be a little tricky because if you're working with a really big canvas, it's almost impossible to hold a cup of paint or a container of paint against the canvas and flip it. So there's another approach you can use that gives you the same results, and I'll show you how I would do that. I'm going to pull over one of these canvases that's sitting up high so you can see how easy it is for me to get underneath it because it's got those screws on the edge. So I'm going to do this sort of free-form, let it happen flip. You'll pour your 3 different colors into your glass. You'll hold it on the canvas and you'll flip it, the canvas over, hold it there, and then you flip it back. If you're working on something very large, you can actually cut out this part of the glass, set it on your canvas, pour your 3 paints in, or however many colors you're using, and then lift. And you can even do that in multiple spots. But so you can see how it works, and it'll take a little time for the paints to sort of move around and settle. I will just do the standard flip. In fact, I think I'll go ahead and... Now, the white paint tends to be heavier than your other colors. So I'm going to start with my yellow. I've got that in there, and I've got that poured in. I'm going to give my canvas a quick swipe with the white paint. And I can even see a few cells in just this light coat because I've got the silicone in there. So I know it's working. All right. So first I've got my yellow, and then you should be able to see that I pour in my purple and it really sits on top. So you're getting a layer of purple on top of your layer of yellow. And next I'm going to layer in my white, and when I get that all put together, and there's of course silicone in both of them, all right, I'm ready to hold my cup up to the surface. So I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm going to put my hand right where the cup is. This is really important, and why I like to use the screws, because if you've got to line it up with 4 little cups down there, you're very likely to miss it. Okay, so we are ready to lift. You should be able to see pretty good. Get you right in the camera. So this is the fun part. Give it a little twist because it's kind of got a little suction going there, and up it goes. All right, now let's get my cup out of the way, and we're going to watch this guy work. And you can see where my little drizzles were. I kind of like that effect. Cells are already starting to open up. I'm going to slowly move it around. If you move it too fast, you actually end up mixing your colors. So the slower you go, the more patient you are with it, the better the results will be. It is a little tricky to get the paint coming down toward the corners, and even though it feels like I've lost my purple, when I go back the other way, it will come back. So I'm going to keep it going. Got some really cool shapes in there. Okay, slow down. It's going, it's going. And then as I look at it, I think about what colors do I want to dominate, and I watch where they're flowing, and then when I get near the end, I'll want to finish up, and I want to have a little more white than yellow. So for now, I'm going to finish up the top part, and then when I turn around and start coming back down, you'll see that my white's going to kind of stretch out there for me. Let's get rid of some of that yellow. And it's working pretty good. There we go. We're getting a lot more variation in where the cells are. We're getting some of those stripes. I'm going to try to get it all the way off this corner. Of course, I've got my surface covered with plastic, and I'm in my studio, and my floor is a disaster, so I don't have to worry much about that. We'll get it back over this way, and again, I want to finish up with the white coming down that way a little more. And in fact, if I've got some corners that are a wee bit empty, it's coming good, coming good. I can even do a little more paint on it, but I don't think I should have to do that with this one. I'll get it a little lower so you can see more of it happening. There we go. I really like the purple, and I might even want to put a little more in there, so we'll see where we get when we get to the end. I'm getting ready to do, ooh, cool, okay. I'm getting ready to do a piece that's going to be 48 by 48. I'm going to just use my finger to get it around the bottom there a little. Let's see if we can get this purple to stretch out a wee bit more. Yeah, there it goes, looking cool. Get rid of some of the yellow in that direction. Don't want to lose that dark purple that's down there. And you can help it out a wee bit if you need the corners to get a little bit covered. We'll just kind of give it a little help. And I think I'll even give it a little dab of white just to keep it going down here. Come on. There we go. That'll just get it off that corner a bit, and I'll just keep that swirling around some. Come on. Okay. Now let's bring my white back down the other way. And actually, a lot of the paint is falling on the plastic that I have on the table. I'm going to set the whole piece down, and hopefully you'll be able to see the whole thing. Let's see, I think you can just about see it. Well, let me let you have a look at some of these wonderful little cells that have opened up. We've got some real cool shapes in there. It just looks very organic. Looks like it's something that came out of the earth. I'm going to set the whole thing down, and let's see if you can see it. Here we go. Let's take the camera right up and come down here and take a look at some of the areas. Some really cool cells. So that's the cup pour. I'll put the camera back out of the way. Hopefully we're still able to see. I have my gloves on. There we go. And the longer this sits, the more cells will show up. And in fact, now that I've got that glove off, I can bring the camera back again. There's some really cool stuff going on right in here. Some tiny little fissures that are developing, and there's lots of little fun cells. So you can imagine if you were doing a really large canvas, you'd probably want to have everything ready to roll, and you probably wouldn't be filming it like I'm doing this. There we go, we got it back on the image. Got lots of little cells happening. I put a fair amount of silicone in there, a few drops per ounce if you're weighing it. If you mix the silicone, you'll get, if you whip it up once you've put it into the paint, you get smaller cells. If you let the few drops sit on the top, you'll get some larger cells, which is what I had in that piece that I was showing you earlier. That piece had some very large cells in it. It's a pretty straightforward process. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty messy, and it just really helps to have everything set up in advance. Again, there's lots of different ways of getting the paint to flow onto your surface, whether it's wood or canvas. I like the organic swirling, but the swiping techniques work well too, especially if what you want is something that looks a little more structured, like an abstract landscape. You can even drop spots into the wet paints and get them to spread out to look like flowers. So there are a lot of different ways you can play with the materials. It's not a terribly expensive process. I typically use the deeper canvases. So to get started, what you need is some kind of a product that will enhance the flow. So either a flow medium from either Golden or Liquitex, or the Flow Troll. It comes in smaller than gallon jugs. Some plastic cups for mixing, a surface, some rubber gloves. I've even used plastic spoons and that sort of thing for mixing instead of the wooden sticks. You can use tiny little cups for measuring your portions and then mix them into larger cups. Any kind of, some people even drag paper towels through the surface, but any kind of a stiff object to do that swiping process. They need to dry. It does take them longer to dry than typical acrylics. Typical acrylics, some of my paintings are dry in a half an hour, sections of them. This probably 24 hours before. And if you've poured really thick and haven't let it drip off very much, it could even take more than 24 hours. I give them at least 72 hours before I do the two-part resin. So I leave the screws on the back so that when I'm ready to resin, I'll tape underneath the canvases and then pour the resin and let it drip off. When you pull the tape off, all of those drips are gone. So give yourself a good surface for it to drip onto and then let those sit for another couple of days. When you're doing resin, it's good to have them in a room where there's not a lot of activity because you can get dust particles and things that get caught in the resin. But this is a really fun process. It's easy, and I have a workshop coming up in April that's on the Greenville Center for the Arts website, and we're going to be doing 2 days. We'll be able to leave our pieces overnight. We won't be pouring resin, but I will demonstrate a resin pour at the end of the first day, and then I take my sticky piece home with me, but at least you'd have an opportunity to see what the process is like. So I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry we got a little bit of a late start. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm artist@dianedean.com, and I'll see everyone who's taking my workshop in April.